Greetings everyone! This is a quick promo before the video begins. If you're new to the channel and you didn't know it yet, I am actually an author in addition to being a YouTuber, and I have 2 books that you can get on Amazon. Operation Red Dragon: The Daikaiju Wars Part 1 and The Occult Mafia. The first is sort of a bizarre, absurdist kaiju anime mashup, and the other is a horror noir story with a hint of a western thrown in there. They're both set in the same universe, and at this point have received mostly positive reviews, so you might want to check them out. I've provided Amazon links for both of them down in the description. They're both available in either paperback or Amazon Kindle, and Operation Red Dragon is also available in audiobook form. So if either of these strike your fancy and you want to support a struggling artist, feel free to go down and check out either one or both of them. Alright, the shameless self-promotion is out of the way, we can get on with the video. Thank you all for your support. Well, our first look at the Animaniacs reboot is finally here. A trailer dropped on Hulu. I don't necessarily know if this trailer is something that will actually be in the show or if it's just made for advertising, but either way, it's meant to show us what it's gonna look like and what it's gonna be like. So I figured I may as well share my thoughts since I already did a pretty extensive video kind of predicting what the first episode might be like. Again, just spitballing that. I don't necessarily know if that's what will actually happen. But that was based on a trailer that just showed us the recording process and a few storyboard scenes. We didn't actually see anything in motion. This trailer does show us something in motion. So, what are my thoughts on that? So let's start with the visuals. As far as the visuals go, this looks really good. Obviously, it's not hand-drawn anymore. It's done digitally. But as digital animation goes, this is really, really good. It does feel different, I will say that. But it also is, I think, as close as digital form animation can get to hand-drawn animation. Hand-drawn animation, of course, has always had a certain freedom when it comes to what it can do. You're not working with any real limits as far as how the characters are physically. In digital animation, the characters have to have skeletons that allow them to move, and that can sort of be restrictive. It was restrictive for a very long time. Early forms of digital animation, you'll often find a critique that they look stiff and unnatural, as opposed to hand-drawn stuff which can do just about anything. You want a character's limbs to stretch well beyond what's possible, you just keep drawing that limb getting longer and longer. It's that easy. Well, I wouldn't say easy, it's a painstaking process, but in the end you could actually do that, whereas you couldn't do it with digital animation at first. In this series, we are seeing that digital animation truly has gotten up to a point where it can really catch up with the 2D hand-drawn stuff. This does have that elasticity, that ability to warp and twist in ways that early digital animation simply wouldn't have had. And it looks smooth, it looks crisp. Again, it doesn't quite have the same snap, if you will, as the hand-drawn stuff, but I'm not going to split hairs. I'm no snob when it comes to this sort of thing. I think this looks good, and when you see it in motion, I think you'll agree that it looks good as well. But visuals can only carry something so far. If there's nothing of substance beneath it, it's not going to last very long. The most pristine and intricately painted Easter egg in the world will ultimately shatter if there's nothing underneath or what's underneath is rotten. So what is the content of this trailer? Well, as I'm sure you gathered, they're sort of riffing on that most iconic scene, well, maybe not the most iconic, but one of the most iconic scenes from the original Jurassic Park. Obviously because Steven Spielberg is involved, so inside joke right there. But it's going on that scene, only instead of seeing real live dinosaurs for the first time, we're seeing the return of the Warner Brothers and the Warner sister. And I have kind of mixed feelings about the execution we see here. Just hear me out on this. I've been revisiting my Animaniacs DVDs since the announcement, since that initial trailer dropped, because I wanted to refamiliarize myself with the show, and because it's just a really good show. As a kid, I absolutely loved it because of how funny and how perfectly timed it was. Although, as a kid, I also didn't really get all of the jokes, per se. Now that I'm an adult, I have a newfound appreciation for Minerva Mink. The nuance with which the comedy is delivered, and now I can actually get some of the jokes that I didn't understand as a child. That is definitely what I meant to say. And what I'm particularly noticing in those classic episodes is that even when they go into full-on parodies of certain things, they always put their own unique spin on it. It's not an exact recreation, it's a satire. It's riffing on the whole thing, but giving it its own distinct identity. Look up any example you can think of. The Tiger Prince opening, Cutie and the Beast, Our Last Space Cartoon, We Promise, any of those ones that go into full-blown satirization of pre-existing works, it's never just a one-to-one recreation. It's always a recreation through the warped lens of bizarre Golden Age cartoon logic. And that's part of what made it work so well. That's part of what made it so distinct and allowed it to age as well as it has. Sure, there are some references in the original that haven't quite aged all that well. It's very grounded in the 90s in some cases. Yet at the same time, most of it you still get today. This trailer is almost an exact one-to-one recreation of that scene from Jurassic Park. Now, to be fair, there are clever moments in here. Casting Steven Spielberg in the John Hammond role and some of the dialogue that's retooled to fit into the whole meta-narrative of this being a reboot, I can appreciate all of that. But at the same time, the recreation feels too exact. This doesn't feel like a warped version of Jurassic Park like we might have seen in Animaniacs. This feels like Jurassic Park, only Steven Spielberg and the Warners are inserted into it. That feels slightly more like something we would see from Family Guy than we would from Animaniacs, because that's part of Family Guy's whole shtick. The whole exact recreation of something, but twisting one element to make it funny. I don't like Family Guy, which is why I put funny in quotes. But I do wonder about that. Like, if this is representative of what the whole show is going to be, does that mean that the whole idea of what counts as satire has changed? It does have me wondering. I mean, we've only got this one moment so far, and I don't even know if this is going to be in the show proper. For all I know, this was made exclusively to advertise. And maybe it is. Maybe it's a cold open. I don't know. But I do hope it's not necessarily indicative of the best writing this reboot will have to offer. Because if it is, we might be in trouble. I don't want to come across like I'm making any sweeping judgments here. We've only got this much of it so far, and you know, I'm not going to pretend like the original Animaniacs was always hits across the board. There are some segments that are not as funny as others. Heck, there are some segments that I couldn't even stand as a child and still don't like today. I never found the Hip Hippos to be particularly funny when they were in the leading roles. I felt they were better as supporting characters. Cannot stand the Buttons and Mindy cartoons because they just feel more mean-spirited than funny. So, yeah, I realize the original show wasn't perfect. I'm not nostalgia blind. And yes, I also recognize that the original show had its fair share of pop culture references as well. But again, like I said, I have a new appreciation for how that stuff is delivered. There's always an internal logic for it. Taming of the Screwy is a good example. That was one of the show's earlier full half-hour episodes. One that wasn't comprised of sketches, but instead told a single story throughout the whole runtime. That has a lot of pop culture references and celebrity cameos towards the end. Well, celebrity cameos as far as visuals go. But it makes sense in context. It's not just random. There's a reason why all of those characters are there, because there's a studio-wide party being held. Anyone who's anyone is going to be there. So once you get there, it makes sense you would run into Spike Lee or Mel Gibson or even Wayne and Garth from Wayne's World. We're already in a setting where cartoon characters exist in reality. Why not other fictional characters as well? It all makes sense when you see it. It doesn't feel random. Not like the Family Guy method of doing this long-winded setup and then cutting away to something completely different based on that setup that has nothing to do with the rest of the story. I don't want Animaniacs to fall into that trap. Not that a cutaway gag is in and of itself bad, but it can be overused, and of all the different forms of comedy you can get wrong, non sequitur comedy is right up there with anti-humor in terms of not guaranteed to actually work. So I hope Animaniacs doesn't fall into that trap. I really do. So in the end, it looks good visually. I'm gonna need to see a little bit more of its actual content before I can make any sort of statements as to whether or not I'm thinking it's gonna be truly great like the original. I certainly don't want it to be bad. I really don't. Although I also will say that for its own sake I hope it is good, because if it turns out to be bad, this trailer will come back to bite it, because if you remember how things go in Jurassic Park, after this initial scene of wonder and awe, it's all downhill and everything goes out of control. That would be very unfortunate for the showrunners if that's what happens here. But I don't want that to happen. I want this show to be good. At the very least, it feels like they're trying. It feels like they are making an effort to do this show justice, based on what we've seen so far. And hopefully that effort pays off. We will see in November, I suppose. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer signing off.
If you enjoyed this video, you know what to do. Like and subscribe, then go down to the description to find links to follow us on DeviantArt, Patreon, and Twitter. While you're there, you'll also find the Amazon links for the original novels Operation Red Dragon, The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, and The Occult Mafia. 2 books I think you'll really enjoy. Thank you all, and we appreciate your support.